right, guys, welcome back to some world history today. It's good to see everyone here ready to go, jumping in after our work day yesterday. If you didn't get the memo or you didn't know what was going on yesterday, the whole reason we didn't have class is because it was originally scheduled as the ACT day or whatever, and so you were able to go in. We as teachers communicated with you guys. I sent out an email to all my students that I hadn't really heard from or that possibly didn't have some of the assignments like our first e-learning quiz done. Speaking of that, if you haven't done that first e-learning quiz, make sure you're reading your emails, following along, and getting that stuff done. All right, so that's a priority because that's how I measure participation. Like, hey, you're actually engaged, you're doing your stuff, and that's a big mark to make sure that you're actually attending school and you get credit for that. All right, so we talked a little bit about that. It looks like everyone's joined up and ready to go. All right. Now, as we move on and we start kind of pushing towards the end of this week and finishing up our lectures for this week, I want to make sure that we are all outlined and understand our schedule. So I mentioned this before anyone joined up or as people were kind of getting into class, but I want to make sure everyone understands that yesterday was your work day because it was originally scheduled as the ACT day. On Friday, we have no school, so you won't have any live classes, any open office hours, none of that stuff's going on, all right, because it's just like you didn't have school that day. And on Monday, you also don't have school because that's technically your Easter break, all right? So you got a 4-day weekend. Now, that being said, remember, and you've got tons and tons of emails, and your parents have as well from the district, make sure you're practicing social distancing, all right? Don't run out to a friend's house or be hanging out with everybody. We do have confirmed community spread cases around here. We just want to make sure we're healthy, we're not getting sick. But I would encourage you, go out and enjoy the outdoors. It is super, super nice outside, and it's going to be for the rest of the week. So enjoy it, get out, exercise, have some fun. Just make sure that you're not kind of meeting up with a bunch of people and getting everybody sick, all right? So just be safe. Be smart about it, all right? I know that you guys are smart enough to figure these things out, but make sure you're getting her done, all right? Now, that being said, today I want to jump in and I want to talk about the beginning of World War II. And the way that we're kind of going to get started with that is we're going to think a little bit back to that video that we actually watched on Monday. So if you remember on Monday, we spent some of the class talking a little bit about the beginning of World War II and some of the things that led there, right? The 1920s, the 1930s, dictators, the rise of these like big totalitarian leaders. And then our assignment was that you were supposed to watch World War I oversimplified, and then you took some quick notes on that and you turned that into me, all right? I saw that a lot of you guys got that done. Awesome, perfect, wonderful job, all right? Now, if you don't have that done, make sure you go back and you do that because it's going to give you some information that's going to lead in and help you understand our stuff for today. So if you look at the board here, I've got a quick little couple questions that you would know if you had watched and gone through World War I oversimplified. All right, so the two really guiding questions or things we want to focus on today to start our discussion is when did World War II begin and what event started World War II? All right, now those two big questions we're going to reinforce, and they're going to be on your assignment at the end of today, a quick little quiz to make sure you're paying attention and following along. All right, and so we're going to start and answer these questions as we go along. But the way that we're going to talk about World War II today and kind of debrief and start thinking about what this lead up to Hitler and his aggression and all of these things mean to us, we're going to keep track of that by taking some notes. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to pull out some way to take notes. Whatever you've been doing for my class, whether it's your Google Doc, whether it's your notebook or just a hard piece of paper to write on, I want you to pull that out so you can stay accountable and follow along and actually have this information for when you take your quiz. All right, so once you have whatever you need to do to make yourself successful and ready to take notes, I want you to go over to that participant. Yep. And click that green little yes so that I can make sure everyone's following along and you are ready to go and learn about Hitler and the rise of the German army and all this crazy stuff that happens in World War II. You got a little taste of that with the video, but we're going to reinforce those concepts today and really break it down to understand. So it looks to me like a lot of us are getting these things done. I'll click yes on mine so that you can see what it's supposed to look like. A lot of us are ready to go. Kim, Rylan, Menthe, make sure you grab your stuff. Trista, Tristan. Make sure we're on board and ready to go.
Okay.
Awesome. Guys, we're looking good. I'm liking the participation today. All right, so we got something ready to go and take notes. It looks like everyone's pretty much on the same page and ready to go. So without any further ado, here's what we're going to do. We're going to start out by talking about World War II. We're going to look at a few pictures. We're going to talk about these two questions that we have at the very beginning, all right? And then we're going to break down how things start to move forward when we start talking about the aggression, the actual warfare of World War II. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to share my screen here so that you can watch and follow along as we take some notes. And we're also going to finish up by watching this cool trailer to a movie that we might discuss a little bit later. Awesome. So if you take a look, guys, our concept today is the beginning of World War II. We've talked about the lead up. I've kind of dangled that carrot in front of you as you guys got a taste of all of these different forms of aggression and these changes that happened in the 1920s and the 1930s. Now we're going to talk about the dynamic beginning to the actual conflict. Because one thing that a lot of people sometimes don't recognize or understand is that Hitler came to power and did a bunch of stuff before World War II ever began. And you actually saw that in your World War II oversimplified video, part 1, that you guys watched already and took notes on. So you know that, you understand that, and we're going to talk about how that leads us into the actual warfare and the fighting that we see. So the title of these notes are the beginning of World War I, or World War II. All right, so our quick little quiz. We've got 3 questions that I've got here really specifically, all right? 2 of them I really want to focus on. So our quick little quiz to get us thinking and working through some of this information is I asked, when did World War II begin? And what I mean by that is I just kind of want the general year. If you give me the specific date, that's even better. But I also ask what event marked the start of World War II, which can reinforce that. So I'm going to give you an opportunity. Does anyone remember what year World War II actually started? If you do, unmute your mic and shout it out. You got it. Let's see if anyone was paying close attention.
Don't know. 1939.
1939.
September 1st.
There you go. Even more specific. I'm happy that we're following along. All right. So we worked together to figure out, and we got this on our video. World War II began on September 1st, okay? And you can put this in your notes if you want to reinforce this, all right? September 1st, 1939. And it started with a very specific event. Does anyone remember what event happened on September 1st, 1939? Rolling the dice. What do we have? No? No one remembers? All right, so on September 1st, 1939.
Cold War, the Cold War.
Not the Cold War. The Cold War happens after World War II. On September 1st, 1939, the thing that really kickstarts, we mark it as the very beginning of World War II, it's Hitler's invasion of Poland. All right? So what event started World War II? It's Germany invades Poland. Now, a lot of us didn't know this, so make sure to write this down if you don't know and you can't remember, all right? So what event started World War II? It's Germany's invasion of Poland. And then the last question that I have right up there on the notes, okay, is what were some of the results? Now, we don't have to really break that down because we're going to get a lot of that information as we talk about the actual conflict today. But I want you to remember that this only happens, Germany only invades Poland because they have a bunch of alliances and treaties and pacts with other countries. Hitler, way before we see him really get super aggressive and start World War II, he made friends with all of the dictators that we saw rise to power in the 1930s. So he has a pact and an alliance with Italy. He has a pact and an alliance with Russia. He has a pact and an alliance with Japan, and all of these people have his back, and he knows that they're not going to attack him when he decides to jump in and do this. And that's what leads to the beginning of World War II. That's what brings us to the actual nitty-gritty warfare. So let's talk about what actually motivates Hitler and the German army to start World War II. And we can do that by taking a look at the things that change in Germany during this time and Germany's military might. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is German military might. Guys, Germany didn't just go and start World War II because they just thought it would be cool. They had a lot of information and background and training on their side. Germany had been building up a military for years under the leadership of Adolf Hitler. They had been slowly but surely expanding upon those things that had stopped them after World War I. Remember, they signed the Treaty of Versailles saying like, hey, it was our bad. We'll take all the blame for this war, right? And they were forced to make their military super small, take away their Air Force and their Navy and all this stuff. Well, when Hitler comes to power, he's like, screw all of that stuff in the Treaty of Versailles. That was unfair. And he starts to build up his military. And that's what makes them bold enough to go in and invade Poland and start World War II, all right? So neutrality during this time, so remember it was where all of these countries were neutral. They didn't want a World War I situation to happen again, all right? And the appeasement of Hitler, so giving Hitler whatever he wanted with no consequences, and the leadership of the League of Nations, it really led to this nationalistic movement in Germany and a growth of this powerfully scary military force. So under Hitler, Germany was able to expand their military, grow their reserves, and become a powerhouse when it came to having the background and the people to support a super strong military-industrial complex. All right? Overall, what you need to know is that during the 1930s, Germany was growing in their military might. And then they started to flex it when they invaded Poland in 1939. Now, appeasement, just a little reminder, guys, here in the bold, all right, I give you the definition or the workable definition that we have used in this class of what appeasement is. It's giving into the demands of an aggressor in order to keep the peace. Remember, all of the allied nations, like, were telling Hitler, hey, don't go take any more land. And then when he went and took more land, they would like fly in and they'd meet with him and be like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Don't do it anymore. And he'd be like, okay. And they say, oh, sign a piece of paper saying you're not going to take any more land. So he'd sign a piece of paper. And then they'd leave and say, oh, hey, we promoted peace and diplomacy. We talked it out. Everything's good. And then while they were away, Hitler would take more land. And then so they were like, okay, let's go talk to him again. Hey, don't take any more land. And he says, okay, I won't. Signs another piece of paper. They go back. They just continually keep giving in just a little bit and a little bit and letting him take what he wanted in order to keep the peace, but there are no consequences. And so that's how Hitler starts to grow and becomes as bold as he is to go in and invade Poland in 1939. Now, here's what Germany had, just so that we have a little background on what the military muscle actually looked like of Germany. All right? Number one, after the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler was really, really focused on building his military in ways that were going to give them an advantage if they ever became the aggressor in another world war. And so he focused a lot on a newly developed Air Force. Air Force. And he called it the Luftwaffe. Now, this Air Force was one of the most advanced air forces of any nation around the globe during this time. By 1939, Hitler had focused on training pilots and engineering aircraft so that they could really go in and effectively bomb and strike and attack any military positions. So Germany had this brand new Air Force that was nice and shiny and super deadly called the Luftwaffe. Now, not only did Germany have their Air Force, but Hitler also really focused on preparing a large standing army. So remember, the Treaty of Versailles said that Germany couldn't have an army of more than like 100,000 men. Well, when Hitler comes to power, remember, he says, screw the Treaty of Versailles, and he does whatever the heck he wants because no one wants to step in and start another war. So Hitler starts to grow his military. He starts to build tanks. He starts to recruit soldiers, and he focuses on growing this huge army and infantry, and he calls them the Wehrmacht. That's how you say that word right there. It starts with a W, but it's German, all right? So that's the Wehrmacht. And the Wehrmacht was a super deadly military force, and they end up being part of that whole thing that we talk about called Lightning War, Blitzkrieg, all right? We're going to expand on that a little bit more. But Germany has the Luftwaffe, the Wehrmacht, and then last but not least, they refuse to stop there, right? Hitler tosses the Treaty of Versailles out and says, I'm going to do whatever I want, so he starts to build a super strong navy. He has a well-engineered navy that is not only supported by battleships, but a wealth of submarines. And they're called the Kriegsmarine. And so these three elements make Germany a military powerhouse. It makes them bold, and it inspires them to go out and start taking military action because no one is reinforcing any consequences on this country. And so they take this might and they start to apply it. And we'll watch how this leads to the aggression of World War II. So we've got the Luftwaffe, okay, the Luftwaffe, we've got the Wehrmacht, and we've got the Kriegsmarine. Now, there was an overwhelming desire from Germany, inspired by Hitler, okay, to unite Europe through a common German culture and ethnic pride. So under the teachings and ideas of Hitler, but also reinforced from everyone else around in Germany, right? There was this idea that German culture and German people are superior than everyone else. And so there was this overwhelming desire where they say, we need to take over all of Europe and make them German. We need to unite them, spread our culture, spread our ethnicity and our pride to make the world a better place. That's the idea that inspires this Nazi movement that we see. And so they thought that the German Empire and heritage needed to unite and needed to express superiority on everyone else. So not only do they think that we're better than everyone, but we need to go out and seize power and take from everyone else this area so that we can spread our influence because we're just better. That's the mindset of the Nazis. That's the mindset of Germany. And we see that feed into why Hitler goes out and starts taking all that land and then eventually just straight up invades Poland because he's got a strong military and he stands up for these ideas that he has preached to his people for years. These are the ideas of Nazi Germany. So make sure to lock that in. Understand what German military might actually looks like. And the cool thing about this is that World War II, even more than World War I, where we were able to look at pictures from World War I, World War II has way more pictures. In fact, one of the crazy things about Adolf Hitler is that he was really, really focused on documenting a lot of things. So he had entire film crews and cameramen that would follow his men around and follow the idea and the power of Nazi Germany as it grew in the area. So there are like millions of hours of uncut and undiscovered footage that were actually taken by German cameramen and videographers during World War II. So we have a wealth of pictures that we can look at. And so I want to take a look at a couple of them just to give you an idea of this military might that Germany was in 1939. So if you take a look, remember we talked a little bit about propaganda during World War I. This whole idea that Germany was this power-hungry, evil, warmongering, mad brute that was going to steal your liberty and take all of these things that were near and dear to your heart, that still persists all the way through into World War II. And we actually see it reinforced by Hitler's Nazi Germany. So if you take a look, right here is a military exercise actually to kind of show off just how large their standing army is. Remember, this is the Wehrmacht. All of these guys are infantry soldiers waiting for Hitler to speak in this giant It's basically like a giant town square gathering space to show off the ranks of Nazi Germany. Here's another view of another type of rally. Hitler had tons of these rallies, not only because at this time, guys, broadcast television, like you couldn't just like broadcast a message unless it was maybe over the radio during this time. It just wasn't super effective. So the best way to address all of your people and make yourself look powerful and good was to have these huge gatherings where you would basically show off how many men were in your military, how good they looked, and you would consistently spread all of these ideas that were supported by Nazism. So it's almost this cult of personality. And you'll hear that as you get older and as you work through different things, but it's this following of a person because of the culture that they have around them and the allure of this kind of bravado, this confidence that they exude. And that's definitely what Hitler had, and he brought it all together in these giant exercises like this. If you take a look right here, this is the Luftwaffe. These were actually the Luftwaffe aces. So these were the ace pilots who were actually sent in whenever there was like dogfighting type warfare over an area. They were really good at shooting down other planes. And so this is a whole group of Luftwaffe planes. Right here, this is a Panzer tank division. All right. These men back here, there's like men in vehicles if you look back in the background here coming down this gully, and then all of these Panzer tanks moving forward. This is a wonderful picture of the way the Wehrmacht looked and acted. They were a whole lot of people all at once. They struck incredibly fast, and they overwhelmed you with not only a surprise kind of like ambush style quick attack, but also with sheer numbers. And so you can actually take a look. This just looks like a huge gathering of like military power in one single place. This is the Wehrmacht, and this is kind of what Blitzkrieg looked like. They just be coming across the countryside, moving at incredible speeds. It was absolutely insane. It also helped that they were on meth, which is an actual real thing. In World War II, a lot of German soldiers, because methamphetamine wasn't labeled as like a drug or a narcotic like it is in our society today, it was actually labeled as like medication, almost like an energy like drink or supplement. And so tons of German soldiers were actually like tweaked out on meth as they were rushing across the Polish countryside and the French countryside, participating in these Blitzkrieg type attacks, because it was all about speed. And meth gives you tons of energy. It has a lot of super negative side effects, but two of the things that it does really well for soldiers is it gives you a ton of energy and it keeps you awake. And so these soldiers would be hopped up on meth, would just be tweaking out, going and fighting for Nazi Germany and participating in this Blitzkrieg idea of warfare. It's kind of crazy. There's tons of cool documentaries on this, but Hitler was also on meth too, but we can talk about that at a later time. He was also on cocaine and every other drug as well. But if you look right here, this is another picture of a Luftwaffe attack, actually. This is during the bombing of London. They call it the London Blitz. But these are all Luftwaffe bombing planes, actually, and they're flying over, carrying out a bombing raid. Right here is a picture of the Kriegsmarine. If you look, these are all World War II battleships. What you can't see are all of the submarines that were also part of the German Navy. So this was a big aspect of how powerful they were, because they had these silent but deadly type warfare attacks that they could do when it came to submarines and it came to giant battleships and all of these crazy things. All right. So let's talk about it, because we already know when it happened and what goes on, but what are the first major moves? What actually leads us into World War II? Let's reinforce those ideas, all right? So here's the deal. The first major move by Germany and Adolf Hitler, who was leading them at the time, was this idea of Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, that gets unleashed onto Poland. So on September 1st, 1939, the German Wehrmacht and Luftwaffe actually fly in. The Luftwaffe fly into Poland. The Wehrmacht actually invade through the border. But they invade Poland, and they strike quick, and they strike hard. Now, Polish forces really were no match for just how strong the German military actually was. And they sent in so many men so quickly, almost any military at the time would have been overwhelmed. And so, during this attack, we see the idea of lightning war start to develop. And we've talked about lightning war. In German, it's Blitzkrieg, okay, because that means lightning war. And what this was, it was a strategy in which the German military focused on attacking quickly, bringing in tons and tons of men. And as part of this, they would also send all of the people that they were like displacing. So if they invaded an area, all of the refugees or the people that lived in that area, they would send them ahead of them. They would like force them to run ahead of the German military. And so they would be going into all of these villages or these towns or these places ahead of the military and complicating a bunch of things and making a lot of confusion. And then the German military would attack hard and fast. It was all about being quick and attacking, popping them right in the mouth. And this is actually super effective for the Germans. Germany not only invades Poland and takes it over in less than a week, they take over an entire country in less than a week. But then they turn around because they've signed that alliance, that non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union or Russia, led by Joseph Stalin, and they decide to set their sights on France. And so using this idea of Blitzkrieg, all of these men in this super fast warfare, they invade France and they end up taking the country over in an incredibly short amount of time. In southern France, what they actually do is to make the people of France not so like rebellious and out of control. They actually set up a government that is supposed to be the official French government, but it was just an unofficial puppet state, which means that Germany was actually giving the information and pulling the strings and doing whatever they wanted, but they put a few French people in charge to make it look like France still had a government. And so Germany invades France, and they take over the area with this lightning war, with Blitzkrieg, and they set up a puppet state. They actually call this Vichy France. Now, this is all because they wanted to keep the French people kind of subdued. They wanted it to look like there was a legit French government that was supporting the Nazis. And they made it look that way. And so through most of World War II, we see this constant battle between the French people and the Vichy government of France that are led by the Nazis. It's a super complex topic. We could spend days and days talking about the way that Germans and the Nazis at the time occupied other countries, the way they set certain things up. But this is something we're not going to focus too heavily on. Just know that Germany takes over France, and they set up a fake government to make it look like France is still in control, but also supporting the Nazis. It's called Vichy France. Then, once Germany actually invades France and takes it over, they naturally set their sights on England because it is the next stop on this line of allies that are standing in their way, that have declared war on them. Because, guys, on September 1st, 1939, the two countries that actually declare war on Germany are France and Britain. The two allies from World War I that were trying to keep Germany kind of subdued and keep them from starting another world war. So when Germany invades Poland in 1939, boom, right away, France and Britain declare war on Germany. Guess who doesn't declare war on Germany right away? Someone unmute your mic and let me know. Who do you think joins the war, once again, joins the war late in World War II?
U.S.
Man! I was about to say, I was on freaking Google Classroom. But
So-
the US.
In my ears.
It is the U.S. So once again, just like in World War I, good job, guys. Just like in World War I, the United States doesn't join in World War II until way later. In fact, it's in 1941 that the United States joins, and it's because of the attack, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. All right? Now, up to that point, the U.S. didn't get involved. So when Germany actually invades Poland, it's only France and Britain that stands up to them. France gets taken over. Britain's the only one that's left. And so the Germans come up with this code name for the way they're going to take over Great Britain called Operation Sea Lion. And they launched this major airstrike on Britain. They bombed the crap out of London. They send in the Luftwaffe to basically try to take out all of these major cities and force the people of Britain to kind of rise up against their government and say, hey, we need to give up because so many innocent civilians are dying. That was a main focus of this German military offensive, was to attack until they were just ready to give up, all right, especially because of common, just literally civilian casualties. And so these are the first major moves of the war. We see this kind of play out, and this is what brings us into the nitty-gritty actual warfare. It was a very quick takeover by Germany. In fact, they take Poland and they take France in less than a month. It's absolutely insane. And it really looked like Great Britain was going to fall to the Germans as well. Now, they mounted a major planned military offensive. That's why they were so successful. So the last thing we're going to talk about today, guys, is how Germany actually planned to win this war and why it was such a successful offensive. All right? So think about this. Remember, just like in World War I, Germany did not want to fight a war on two fronts. They realized that they were sandwiched in between two kind of enemies that could kind of come in and do whatever they wanted and attack them that would make their life tough if they started a war. So Hitler, being the smart guy that he actually was, signed the Soviet Non-Aggression Pact with Joseph Stalin, right? Making sure that Germany and Russia, or the Soviet Union, were allies. And so Germany focused an offensive against the Allies in the West. They took over Poland in less than a week and then flipped the script, and they went and attacked France, and they set their sights on Britain. It was all about taking out the Allies in the West, going quick, that lightning war. The Germans moved quickly and were extremely deadly. Remember Blitzkrieg. They not only fought in Europe, but guys, they also attacked a ton of area in North Africa. So we see a lot of battles actually start to happen in the northern section of Africa because there were European and Western European specifically interests there in northern Africa. One of the most famous African campaigns that we know of, it's General Erwin Rommel. He actually commanded a Panzer Division. A Panzer was just a German tank division, all right, in Africa. And they went through and they hopped around in all these areas of Africa, attacking all these strongholds and ports and a bunch of different areas in northern Africa. One thing you definitely need to know, guys, is that the Germans dominated Europe early. With their new brand of Blitzkrieg warfare and the super strong military, it really looked like the Germans were going to win World War I in less than a year. They ate the Allies' lunch. It was insane how quick they attacked, how successful they were, and how quickly they were able to beat back any resistance whatsoever. They took out Poland with almost no amount of, of fighting, really, when it came to the significance of the German military. And then when they set their sights on France, France really ended up giving up way, way too much in the beginning. And so they fell extremely quickly to this lightning war. It wasn't like in World War I where they decided to stop, dig in, and actually have an offensive. In fact, the Germans were so successful and attacked so fast that they ended up pushing all of the Allies back to this little coastal town in France called Dunkirk. You've probably heard the name Dunkirk before because it was actually a really famous movie that came out, it would be a couple of years ago now. But that is all about the story of how the Allies ended up getting pushed out of France or being pushed through France all the way back to this one little French town. And then the Germans are trying to decipher or figure out how they're going to actually take out and extinguish the Allies. And all of these civilian boats from across the English Channel, from England, come over to try to ship out all of the soldiers and save them before the Germans close in and absolutely take them out. So that's a really, really cool movie, actually. And it's a true story about how the Allies are trapped at Dunkirk. If you actually take a look, in the early years of World War II, guys, the Allies struggled. They struggled hard, and it looked like they were going to lose everything in the beginning. So make sure you understand that Hitler's Germany, Nazi Germany, really dominated Europe right away. They took over, they were fast, they were efficient, and they were strong. Before we do that, I want to show you right here, if you take a look at this map. So if you actually look at what's going on here, Germany, all right, controls a huge part of Czechoslovakia. They control Austria. They have a little bit of Hungary, actually. And on September 1st, 1939, they invade Poland. And they actually take over Poland all the way up to this little dotted line right here. The Soviet Union takes this much of Poland. Poland ends up falling to Germany and the Soviet Union, both. They divide it. And then Germany sets its sights all the way over here to France. And they attack and they move through France at lightning speed. And what they end up doing is, if you look closely, it's kind of hard to read on this map, but the little town of Dunkirk is actually close to up here. And what happens is that the Allies are pushed back all the way to this little town. And they have to figure out how to evacuate hundreds of thousands of soldiers across the English Channel and get them to Great Britain, where they're safe, because the entire, almost all of Europe, almost all of France here is controlled by Nazi Germany. So to give you a little taste of what that was like, and also kind of get you excited for this movie.
Wait, what's it called? They defeated Europe and then they got pushed back to where?
So Germany defeated most of Europe, okay? They dominated Europe early, and the Allies get pushed back to this little town called Dunkirk.
Okay, got it.
So I want to show you the trailer for Dunkirk, because it is an awesome movie, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what you need to do to finish up for today, and then we're going to be done. But I want to show you this to give you a taste of what this actually looks like.
The enemy tanks have stopped.
Why?
Why waste precious tanks when they can pick us off from the air like fish in a barrel?
There are 400,000 men on this beach. He's coming back round. He's coming back round! Where are we going? Dunkirk. I'm not going back. There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do. If we go there, we'll die. You can practically see it from here.
What?
Home.
Awesome. So yeah, guys, and sometimes showing videos through Zoom, the audio is a little bad, but this movie is one that is absolutely awesome. It's a true story. What actually happens at Dunkirk is that all of the Allies are trapped on that beach, and they put out the all call to anyone that owns a boat in England and all of these civilians actually take their boats into the war zone at Dunkirk to try to pick up as many soldiers as they can and bring them back home to England to try to save the Allies that are stuck on the beach surrounded by the Germans. So it is an awesome movie. It's really, really cool. And it's shot in a really interesting way where the timeline is a little different. But it is a masterpiece. It really is. Now, one cool thing about this unit is when we finish up talking about World War II, after a couple weeks, kind of the way we're going to finish it out is I'm going to let you choose one World War II movie, whichever one that you would really like. I have a bunch of suggestions that I'll give you, but I'm going to allow you to choose a World War II movie to watch and kind of fill out and do a little bit of a report on. But this is one of the options, and it's a really, really good movie. It's shot really well, and it's super modern. I would highly suggest it. You can even go watch the trailer on your own or whatever reviews you want to do, but it's super cool. All right? Now,
On
that
Netflix.
it is on Netflix, isn't it?
Yeah, I looked it up.
Yes.
It is.
It's on Netflix, and it is great. So I highly suggest it. I know everyone's got a ton of time now. So, all right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there real quick because that brings us to the end of our notes for today. All right, we got all of the stuff done talking about what the early days or the early months or years of World War II actually looked like, the very beginning of the conflict, how Hitler's Germany, Nazi Germany, became so powerful and took over most of Europe. We know all that stuff, and we're prepped and ready to go. All right, now the last thing that you have to do to finish up for today's class, to make sure we're ready to go, I'm going to share my screen one more time so that you can see. If you go to Classroom, guys, you will see that I've got our announcements for today, and then down here I posted your assignment. It's a quick little 10-question quiz about what we just talked about today. All right, pretty sweet, pretty simple, really easy. Jump in there and get that done. Turn it into me for a nice little 10 quick points. To prove that you're going through, you're participating, you're watching, you're making sure everything's good to go. And we are finished up once you've taken that and you are done. All right? So make sure you've got these notes and you hold on to them. Make sure you follow through and you do all of the other assignments that you may not have done yet. And make sure to get this quiz done, because when are all things due in my class, guys?
Saturday.
Saturday at midnight. So make sure to get all this stuff done, including this quiz, by Saturday at midnight. So you're all here in class. I'd suggest right after you hop off, you just take this quick little thing. Really easy. It'll make sense to you, and you just took the notes so it's fresh in your mind. So without further ado, does anyone have any questions?
No.
Awesome. So guys, if you don't have any questions, we are good to go. You guys can hop off. We are done with class for today, and I will see you next week on Tuesday, because remember, Monday we don't have class.
See you, Mr. Boyd.
See you guys.